we are going to be starting our next unit, next project. And it is abstract soap carving. So we are going to be using that bar of soap that is sitting in your art kits. Okay, so there is a reason for a bar of soap, and it is not to wash your hands. However, you will be able to use whatever scraps you have to wash your hands with. So it's like a twofer with it. Okay. So you'll notice in Google Classroom under current projects, we've got our new assignment, abstract soap carving. Okay. And you'll see in it, just like with the previous projects, you'll be filling out a progress thing with it. We're going to try something new with Jamboard. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you have a list of what images you're going to be uploading. So it's the same as, before, 3 different views and 1 selfie with your artwork. The rubrics attached to this, so you can kind of peruse that. And then we've got attachments. We have the attachment of the slide presentation that I'm going to show you. We have the Jamboard, which is how you're going to be showing your progress. And then there's an Edpuzzle that you're going to be watching at the end of class. And that's our little demo for this. Okay. So any questions before I get started? Nothing. Okay. So if you do have questions while I'm going through the presentation, just feel free to type it in the chat. I have my chat window in a different place, so I can go ahead and see it. Let's see. First question, where do we get the soap? The soap is in your art kit. Okay, so it should be there. Okay, hand checked, hand packed, all the things. So you should have a bar of soap in there. Okay. So, okay, so we've got our presentation. Okay, so abstract soap sculpture. So this is a project. We haven't done the soap carving. We've done something similar using plaster in the past in our art classes in 3D. And we would do a similar thing with plaster. The only caveat with plaster is that we have to make it from scratch. So it was nice, back in the day when, all the students were in class, because every student would make their own plaster to work with. But since I'm one person, and making that many little teeny tiny plasters would be insanely time consuming, just because you have to have the correct amount of water to powder, and it's, yeah. So we're doing soap carving, okay? And the soap carving is a little bit easier to work with. It's not as hard to carve. So it's a little bit easier, I suppose, but you'll still get some really nice results with it. Okay. So for this project, this was inspired by an artist named Jean Arp. So he is a artist that was born in Germany, but he primarily lived and worked in France. So we consider him a French artist just because that's where he, did all this stuff. But he is a sculptor. So he would create 3-dimensional sculptures that he would kind of create models in plaster, and then from there create these larger sculptures out of stone and bronze. So looking at the plaster models, think of it like maquettes. Okay, so we've talked about maquettes with the cardboard, where you can make like a little mini version. In Intro to 3D, we've made maquettes out of paper. So he would do these little mini versions of his ideas out of plaster because, one, it was easier to work with. Okay, plaster, easier to carve than stone. Okay, it's a little more forgiving. So he was really able to kind of plan out and experiment a lot of his ideas in the plaster before he went on to working with, a 5-foot slab of stone. Okay. So on the table in the picture, you'll see in front of him, he has these little mini models. Okay? They're a little jaggedy looking, okay? But you know, the idea for him was to try new forms, to experiment, kind of figure out what he could potentially do. And then from there, he would work on the larger full-size versions, which are behind him in the picture. So you can see all these huge white sculptures. Those are all out of stone. So in addition, he also worked with bronze. So with bronze, it's a slightly different process where you kind of make a little, well, not a little, but you make a model that's, you know, the size you want. And then melted bronze is poured into this mold. And that's what creates your sculpture. Okay, so kind of similar idea. You still have to start off with the idea, the carving, and then from there, we get that positive full version. With all of his forms, for the most part, he was really dealing with these amoeba-like shapes. So very organic, very curvy, very wavy. They look like blobs, essentially, but very pretty blobs, and that, you know, can resemble other things. So his type of artwork is considered biomorphic. Okay, so he's using these natural forms, but they do have some reference to other things. So flowers, plants, animals, the human figure, okay, without it actually being like a person. Okay, so you'll see in some of his examples, he references the human body, but it's not like a full-on realistic version of the human body. Okay. So the piece on the right is probably one of the better examples of how he uses the idea of the human body to create these biomorphic forms. So the one on the right is called torso. So it's essentially the torso. It's kind of from the neck to like halfway down the thighs-ish. Okay, but it's not a realistic version of a person's body. And you can see where the shoulders are up top, and a little bit of the arms, it's all like cut off, and they're kind of bulbousy. Like no one's shoulders and arms really look like that. And if you look at the back of the sculpture, this kind of resembles, you know, the shoulder blades. So if you like stick out your shoulder blades, they kind of jut out, but no one's jut out that far or that kind of pointy and sharp. And then with the legs, once again, you know, they're kind of cut off halfway where the thighs might be. Okay, not super realistic. You can get the idea that this is referencing the body. On the left, we've got winged being. So once again, you can kind of see resemblances to what could be a human body. So up top, we have maybe head-like. We got this thing sticking out on the left, which is probably the wing. Okay. And then you kind of have the waist and then this blob for the bottom half of the body. Okay. But once again, it's not realistic. Okay. You're not seeing a spine. You're not seeing ribs. You're not seeing elbows. For the head, you're not seeing a nose, mouth, ears, eyes, any of that. It's very abstracted, biomorphic. Then we got this one called Groupe Mediterranean. My French accent, that isn't very French. So this, you know, when I first look at it, I see, you know, resemblance of maybe a fish, like an angelfish. Okay, but then it has this weird thing sticking out of it. Okay, so once again, it has references to those objects without it actually being that. And just a couple more examples. We have étoile, so the star on the left-hand side. And once again, doesn't look like your stereotypical star that you would kind of draw it on a piece of paper, okay? It just has kind of these points that are shooting out. Okay. And then on the right, head with annoying objects. Okay. And so yeah, if you look at what could be the head, okay, you don't necessarily see a realistic mouth, eyes, ears, or anything like that. So what you all will be doing is creating your own small size abstract biomorphic sculpture carved out of a bar of soap. Okay, so there are two types of sculpture in the world, in theory. We've got additive sculpture. So with additive sculpture, that is where you're combining materials to make your art. So essentially you start with nothing and then you add. So with this origami, you added a piece of styrofoam, then you added another piece of styrofoam, then you added another one. With the cardboard, start off with nothing, and then you add a piece of cardboard, then add another piece. Okay, so that's our additive. With clay, okay, I think all of you did clay at some point, hopefully. The majority of what we did was additive. You added a coil and then added another coil and then added another coil on top. Okay. For this project, we're going to be thinking in the opposite way. You're going to be working subtractive. So with subtractive art, you're removing material. You're taking stuff away to create your sculpture. So in this case, you're going to have your solid bar of soap, and you're going to be cutting soap away to eventually create your sculpture. So you're just going to be using pretty much a knife and just shaving it off and shaving it and slicing and dicing, and then magically you will have a sculpture. Okay. So as far as supplies, the supplies are very basic. And I did this just because, you know, with hybrid starting on Thursday, I wanted to be really easy for those of you that will be coming in as far as bringing projects in and back. So you're gonna need a bar of soap from your supply kit. Okay, so everyone's got a bar of soap. If you forget to bring your bar of soap to school when it is your day, good news, I have more soap. Bad news, it's gonna cost you $1. And even worse news, you're gonna have to start your project all over again. Okay, so if you're part of group 2 and you're coming in and you forgot your sculpture, yes, you may have spent 60 minutes working on it the previous class time, but I'm going to give you a brand new bar of soap and you're going to have to start from scratch. Okay. So it's so important that you remember to bring your soap to school. Okay. So I am going to be making little stickers that you'll get to kind of stick on your iPad cover, because I figure everyone's going to be bringing their iPad. So if you have a sticker that says, remember, bar of soap, then you'll remember to bring your bar of soap. Okay. So then, you know, whatever project we do next, you'll get a new sticker and it'll say, remember to bring bottle of glue and scissors and whatever it may be. Okay. So that's kind of where we're at with that. In addition, as far as supplies, you're going to need a small kitchen knife. Okay, so with this, I suggest a butter knife or a paring knife. And I actually have kind of a paring knife here. I was cutting an apple earlier. Okay, so you can see, you know, it's nothing crazy, nothing super large. Okay, just a small knife. So you can use that at home. For in school, obviously, we don't want you bringing a knife to school because that'd be very bad. But I have fettling knives. Okay, so these knives that we were using for clay, okay, we're going to be using these for the soap while we're at school. Okay, so I have a good amount of these. So, you know, you'll use the knife in class, then it's going to get sterilized. And then I have another group of knives that, you know, another class will use, those will get sterilized and they'll just go back and forth. Okay, so these knives are going to be the cleanest knives in the whole land, all right, when we're through with this. Okay, so say number 3, a potato peeler if you have one. Okay, so this is not required. No, this is if you have one. personally, I don't even think I have a potato peeler at home. Just don't peel potatoes. But if you have one, awesome. And you can use that to kind of help shave your soap. So kind of at the later stages to kind of smooth things out. And then number 4 is some kind of surface to work on. So I suggest working on newspaper or a piece of cardboard, just something to have on your table that you can easily clean up. I was, working on my little example this morning, and I, put down a piece of cardboard and it was a mess. Okay, there was soap all over the board. Okay, but then I was able to just pick it up and gently, push all of the shavings into a bowl so I can use the shavings to wash my hands with later. Okay, so any questions on any of the supplies we've got for this project? Give me a thumbs up if you're good. Give me a virtual thumbs up.
Can we also use an X-Acto knife or no?
Good question. So the X-Acto knife, you could use the X-Acto knife. Yeah, so if you're working in kind of smaller areas, you can. I find that the X-Acto knife is really, really sharp though, just because it's so thin. So you run the risk of maybe cutting yourself a little bit more likely than if you're using, a regular knife that's heavier and you can kind of control it a little bit better. So yes, X-Acto knife, but I would use it only when necessary. Okay, good question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So here are some examples of actual soap carvings. I also have a whole box of plaster carvings that, work the same way. So I'll kind of grab those for next class to kind of show. But with this, once again, you are working biomorphic. It is abstract. You are not making a duck out of soap. You are not making a flower out of soap. You're not making a butterfly. You're not making a person. Okay. You're making something that's very curvy and organic and kind of blobby looking, but in a nice way. Okay. So you'll see with the examples, there's a lot of variety. With all of these started off as a bar of soap, that rectangular, boxy piece of soap. Okay, and then the students just started carving away, and then the artwork happens. Okay. With this, I do suggest thinking about how your positive and negative space works. Okay, so having these openings, these little windows throughout, can help break up all of that solid and make your piece a little bit more interesting. Also kind of cutting away from the edges. So this piece on the right is being kind of cut away. It also helps give a more interesting look. You could have holes that go all the way through. Okay, so this image on the right, this bottom hole goes all the way through, but then this top hole, it might be a little bit trickier to see on your iPads, but that hole goes in, but doesn't go all the way through. So it's almost like a little cave. Okay. So that's something else you can definitely do. You want to think about, thicknesses. Maybe have some areas where the soap is thicker and then thinner in other areas where it's jutting out, coming in. Okay. Creating all those different planes. Okay. So think of it almost like a mountainscape. Okay, you've got areas that are higher, areas that are lower, areas that go in, areas that stick out. Okay, because that's going to also create a more interesting sculpture for you. Okay, so lots and lots of variety. Normally, I would say, we're going to sketch and all of that, but I found that it's a little bit harder for students to start off with the sketch and then try to recreate it working subtractively. you're more than welcome to sketch. You know, I'm always a fan of sketches, but I mean, just starting to get a feel for the soap and kind of how it carves and what you can do with it. From there, you can kind of wing it ish, but still, you know, keep in mind, you know, where should I have negative space if I want it? Oh, now that I have this negative space, what should I do with it? Should I have it be a really sharp inward, or should it be a gradual, you know, little level into the negative space? So, you know, you can kind of plan as you go. Some things to remember. So, like I said, you are making an abstract biomorphic sculpture. Please don't try to make something specific. You're not making a duck, a butterfly, a fish, a plant, etc. Okay. It can resemble living organisms. So if you want to reference, let's say, a fish, you can, but I shouldn't look at it and be like, you definitely made a parrotfish out of your soap. Okay. Curvy and rounded always. Okay, that's kind of the key for this. Is you want curvy and wavy and rounded. Okay. It's going to be a lot easier to work with, and the soap is forgiving to a certain extent, but if you try to make something that's very geometric and sharp and jagged, things are going to chip on you. So if you work organic and rounded, those little chips, you can just round them off and make it look intentional. Okay. And that's also another reason why, you know, working in this abstract form works well, because if you accidentally, you know, cut too much off, or if part of it breaks, you can always tweak your idea and make it look intentional. I do suggest working asymmetrically, okay, so uneven. So if you look at, you know, my example that I've been kind of playing with, okay, it's not symmetrical. Right? If I cut it in half, it's not the same on both sides, no matter which way I cut it. Okay, so that's going to help make it look a little bit more natural and not man-made. Okay, a lot of times man-made things are very kind of rigid and organized. So having pass-throughs or holes are cool. Okay, they can definitely help, but you want to remember to do them slowly. Okay, cut off the center. So don't like just stick your hole right smack in the middle like a donut. You know, have it off to one side, have it off to the left or the right. Okay. Also, you know, consider more oval shapes, okay, versus a perfect little circle. Let's see. Make sure you handle the sculpture gently. Okay, it is soap. Soap can break. And when you actually start carving it, you're going to notice it carves a lot really easily. So start off just shaving off a little bit at a time, little bit at a time, little bit at a time. If you go too aggressive with it, you run the risk of your soap breaking. And if it breaks too much where you can't work with it, you'll have to start over and you'll have to buy a new bar of soap. So, you know, a new bar of soap, you go to the Dollar Tree, you can get soap there. Or if you're in person, you can buy one from me. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so the piece will be very delicate, especially the more you cut off. So I don't know how well you guys can see my little picture, but I have one part that's right here. Oh, such good lighting happening right now. Okay. This part here is really thin because I was shaving a bunch off. Okay, so this part is a lot more delicate than like this chunk here, which is just a lot of solid soap. Okay, so you just really got to be careful when you're working. After your form is finished, you are going to have to do a lot of perfecting. So with mine, you probably won't be able to see it well, but as I'm kind of cutting, it's very jagged and it's very faceted looking. So later on, I'll have to go back with my fettling knife or whatever knife I'm using. I'm going to just shave little by little off just to start smoothing all of those edges. Then once most of those edges are smooth, you can go back in with a wet paper towel that all the water is squeezed out, and you just kind of rub, you're like burnishing, buffing essentially, just to smooth your edges. And then you'll be able to have it nice and smooth and kind of pristine, perfect looking. So, let's see. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Good so far. Let me check the chat. Yeah, so we're carving the soap, and it's gonna be very organic or round-ish. Okay. So as far as progress photos, so we're gonna try something different with this. The progress PowerPoint I liked because you were able to answer questions, and it was fun for me to like read all of your answers and kind of see what your thoughts were on things. You know, when students actually filled it out. Not saying you guys didn't fill it out, some of you didn't. Okay, but I know in some of my other classes there was a severe lack of progress PowerPoint filling out. So we're gonna try something different, something a little simpler. So this is where Jamboard comes in. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share from here. So who here has used Jamboard before? Has anyone used Jamboard? Okay, a couple of you. Okay. So the Jamboard app is part of the Google Suite. So it's one of the like little Google app things. So you'll see in the project, okay, it says critique soap. Okay, when I was rushing this morning, I should have changed it to progress, but okay, that's your Jamboard. Okay, when you open it initially, you're gonna see on the bottom, it says unsupported file type. Okay, that's because Google Classroom can't open it, which is why we downloaded the Jamboard app. Okay, so in the upper right-hand corner, we've got the little square with the arrow. Okay, so when you click that, it's going to go ahead and actually open it in Jamboard. Okay, so the way Jamboard works is it's a bunch of slides. It's slide after slide after slide after slide. And this is really nice for working collaboratively with groups. We use this in the 2 grad school classes I took over the summer. One of them was an actual like art making class. And we did all of our critiques through Jamboard. So kind of, we're gonna try this, okay? So on the very first slide, you'll see the project. So it's an abstract soap carving, and then we've got directions. So you're gonna upload a picture of your sculpture in your space at the end of each class. So you'll notice at the top, and we have 1/9. So right now there's 9 pages, okay? And then there's arrows that go left and right. So if I just click on the next arrow, it's gonna take me to a new page, and you'll see that it's divided in half, and we have 2 names. Okay, next page, that's 2 different names. Okay, so each of you has half a board. Okay, so you'll just go ahead, you'll find your name. Okay, it is in alphabetical order by last name. Okay, and at the end of each class, you're going to upload a picture of your sculpture. So here's my example. Okay, so right now this is in theory 2 days worth of work that I did. So I have 2 pictures there. Okay, so to add a picture, you're gonna click on the plus sign. So on the left, we have a toolbar. You'll click on the plus sign, and then you have all of these options. So you can either do camera. Okay, so with camera, it's going to open up the camera, and then you can just go ahead and take a picture. use photo. Okay. And then you can go ahead and place it in your space and then resize it as needed. To do this, you got to be on your actual slide where your name is. You can't just take this and move it, or can you? Oh, you can. Okay. But it's a little tedious to do. So you want to make sure you're kind of on your page. Otherwise, if you're like page 9, you're going to have to scroll over a lot. Okay. So that's one option. Option 2 is click on plus. And if you took your pictures ahead of time, you can hit image library and it's just going to show you your camera roll, and then you'll just find the picture you took. Okay, and then you can add that in. So any questions on that?
Are we just putting in the pictures? We're not answering any questions.
Yep, you're just putting pictures in. Okay, later on I might have some questions that I'm going to have you answer. Ooh. There we go. But for now, just pictures. And this is also going to make it a little bit easier for me to kind of look at your progress throughout. Looking at everyone's PowerPoint, it took time for the PowerPoint to load, and then just scrolling to the correct page, and then, oh, look, this student didn't do it. Okay. It was very cumbersome and really time consuming. This way, through Jamboard, I can just easily, swipe, 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 and see the progress kind of all in one place. You can also see what your classmates are doing. That's one of the things I hate about, the situation we're in is you guys can't really see what each other is working on. Yeah, you probably can see hands working if you look at video view of what your classmates are doing, but you don't really see the final artwork. So this way you can kind of get a nice idea of kind of what your peers are doing.